we can start by telling a little bit about our story, our journey. Let's talk about Tajir, the company, and try to get into the real difficult parts of starting a business, and then get into why engineers in particular should start more companies, and why they don't. My background is that I am not an engineer. Ismail is an engineer, computer scientist. I, however, did learn to code myself. Took a couple of classes when I was in university, and then later on continued, some very, very basic stuff. So I could spin up something using like Rails and Bootstrap, like nothing that great, but I learned. I have started companies with a lot of technical people, a lot of failed companies. So I used to be based in the US, and have worked with a lot of engineers, so I have that experience, and then most recently with another engineer who's sitting right here, Ismail. So that's my experience. Ismail, do you want to quickly talk? Oh yeah, so I studied quantitative economics, international relations, two things that have nothing to do with each other. Went down the investing path for a couple of years, which I hated. It was very slow and just not interesting, I thought. So got into the operations side of a large financial services firm, moved to California and worked with a lot of different startups, doing different things. There's no real position in a startup that's very early stage, like less than 10 people. You're just sort of doing everything. So I did a lot of things with some really interesting startups there. Went to Berkeley, got my MBA, started a small company where we raised a small amount of capital. So I did have that experience before starting Tajir, moving to Pakistan, and eventually starting Tajir.
I'm Ismail. I studied computer science and economics. I have a very erratic early career. So I think I spent one summer interning as a software engineer. Then I spent one summer as a sales and trading analyst at an investment bank. Then I spent a year as a strategy consultant. Didn't like that. Spent a year as a research assistant with the goal of doing a PhD in economics eventually. And then one day Babar called and he said, "Yaar, sab kuch chhod do. Pakistan jate hain. Let's do something in e-commerce." I think it was literally those words, like something in e-commerce.
No, we were running, so
it was very. We didn't know what we were going to do. Usi baat that call, I said, "Nahi, chhod dete hain. Let's not. I mean, this is a dumb idea. I mean, I don't know anything about startups. Like, I haven't even coded after university. Like, I have no idea. This is a bad idea." But then I went to bed and I woke up 3 hours later and I felt more refreshed than I ever have in my entire life. And I called Babar back and I said, "Okay, let's do it." And then I think within a week I gave in my notice. We were back, and this was in 2016. We started a company called Humbike, which is one of the failed startups that Babar was mentioning earlier. Did that for a year. Then we started Tajir in 2018, and we can go into more detail later. But we started Tajir in 2018. For about a year and a half, we weren't really getting anywhere. It was just a lukewarm product until in around November 2019, we did a very hard pivot where we decided to start doing deliveries to customers ourselves. And that completely changed the complexion of our company. That's when we got into Y Combinator. That's when all the numbers started going up and to the right. And that's why we're here today. The story was, in hindsight, it doesn't make much sense. In hindsight, nothing was planned. And so the reason I mention this is because, a lot of people look for certain careers. A lot of you are probably looking for certain careers, looking for clarity, looking for, I do this, then I get, I put in this many years doing this, then I get a reward. Then after 6 more months, I get a promotion. Then another 6 months, I get a promotion. There's just a path in front of you. But for both of us, it was just like, all over the place. And if you looked at us in November of 2019, you probably would have, I don't think anyone would have called us for a talk. That's for sure.
Yeah.
The reason I started is different than the reason I stayed. Like, it's, now the reason is very different. Now it's just, like, you know, the kind of responsibility you get, starting a company, is, it's just, you don't get that kind of responsibility for like 10, 15 years into your career otherwise, right? And then especially in Pakistan, where, you know, it's just, you know the place, you know the people, you know the problems better. You know, I don't know if it's about meaning or not. It's just like, I feel like, just everywhere I see, everything here, everywhere I see an opportunity, I see like there's some core financial services infrastructure missing. There's some core problem. Like there's like 20 startup ideas. I wish, you know, if I had the time and the resources to do angel investing, I'd love to like back people into funding those ideas. But everything just seems like a startup problem here. And look, one problem with Pakistan is obviously we're a little behind in a lot of things, but that's an opportunity.
Okay, so one of the things we really think about a lot is why aren't there enough engineers starting startups in Pakistan? It just seems really odd. Like LUMS especially is considered a top university on par with any university in any country, right? Really, really top. So why is it that when you look at software engineers graduating from a Berkeley or any university around the world, or even like the IITs included, why are there so much fewer who go into either starting their startup or working at startups? You are now at a point in time in the history of this country where you can actually start a startup or work at a startup and have it be extremely financially beneficial, but also learn an incredible amount, more than you would with potential other career paths. Pinpointing what's changed, I think, is something that you were talking about a little bit earlier, which is connectivity, right? The size of your connected market. You can now build for people who have smartphones and access to data. And those numbers reached a tipping point more recently. Secondly, investors from around the world are paying attention. Local investors, in fact, have had to adapt. And I think a third positive change is that now you have very real startups that are doing great work and solving real problems. So those role models are a lot more clear, and some of them have really started scaling in an aggressive way. We employ more than 2,000 people now. That's a pretty substantial scale. So we're not just the 10-person startup anymore. So you're seeing more and more examples of startups that have successfully scaled. So I think a combination of these three things really makes this a viable career path for anyone who wants to either work at a smaller company and learn a lot more, or start their own company.
Anyone, like a person who's dropped out of university or dropped out of high school, 16 years of age, to people who are late in their careers, 40s, people start startups of all types of people start companies at all times. So I think probably the most important thing is like, are you at a time in your life where you can commit a lot to a startup? For university students, it's often good because they are very early in their careers and they don't have obligations, and so they can throw all their energy at a startup and live and sleep at their offices and devote everything they have. The time to start is when you see a burning problem in the world and you just want to solve it. For us, we saw everyone is using smartphones, and what we had some experience. Our family business was in retail distribution, and so we knew exactly what the problems are that retail stores face. And so when we were talking to each other, we were like, okay, if you give a shopkeeper a smartphone, what are they going to do with it? And very obvious thing was buy stuff, right? That's like the most obvious thing. That's one thing that's probably the most critical problem, is just buying inventory is such a pain. And that was something that we were so impatient about. Like once that was sparked in our minds, like we wanted to just drop everything and work on it. There are some companies that are started by solo founders, but generally speaking, I don't think I could start this company as a solo founder. Like it's very hard. So if you find a person or 2 or 3 people that you want to start the company with, that's good time. सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज तो ये है कि आप ऐसी चीज़ बनाएं जो कोई एक इंसान दुनिया में आपका प्रोडक्ट इस्तेमाल करे और रेगुलरली इस्तेमाल करे. आमतौर पे जो स्टार्टअप्स कामयाब नहीं होते, जो फेल करते हैं, वो लिटरली उनका एक भी कस्टमर नहीं होता. ये नहीं होता कि मेरे 100 कस्टमर है या 200, नहीं, उनका एक भी कस्टमर नहीं होता. वो अपनी पूरी वो साल गुजार लेंगे, 1.5 साल गुजार लेंगे, उनका एक भी कस्टमर नहीं होगा जो उनको रोजाना या हर हफ्ते या हर महीने उनके प्रोडक्ट इस्तेमाल करें.
इस पे I'm just going to ask Ismail a question. Ismail, ये जो challenge की बात है, one of the things that I noticed, especially when working with a lot of engineers to start companies, is that there was an inclination for engineers to keep engineering and not talk to customers, not iterate, but to think they know what the customer wants and then keep working. महीने गुजर गए, चलते रहे, एंड में जब लॉन्च किया तो zero. So that's something I've seen. So what's a good way to avoid this pitfall?
You avoid this by having a process where you talk to users and you write code or build your product, and just rinse and repeat again and again.
Fundamentally, the way you have to build your business is forget about the markets. So forget about fundraising. You have to build a business that can survive in any fundraising environment. So our first round was in March 2019. 2020, sorry. When
do you guys know what happened in March 2020?
Yeah, COVID. Like some of the best businesses were built in the toughest times. Uber, Airbnb. They were built during the recent, do we call it the Great Depression or what do we call it? I don't know. 2007,
Great Recession?
Great Recession. Yeah. So, not the Depression, that was 30s. So, like really good stuff. And often a lot of strong investors are aware of this. They know that great startups are often built in the tough times because that's where you build a startup to survive.
What I want to highlight is just like fundraising is not success. Fundraising
absolutely
is
not.
Fundraising, when you go to an investor, you are using it's like a cloud provider, right? Like you use AWS or GCP or Slack or something. Like you give them money, they give you some service. You give your investor equity and they give you a service. That service is just a bunch of money in your bank account. That's not success, right? You can dilute yourself 50% and you can. It's that in itself is not. The only success is cash in your pocket. Does your business have the potential for generating cash flow on its own? That's the only thing that's actually success. Try to spend as little money as possible. Try to raise as little money as possible. Try to have as small a team as possible, right? When you have a team of like you and your co-founder or a team of 3, you don't have to worry about HR and benefits and bureaucracy. And to get to product market fit is basically you figured out your product, people are begging you for your phone number, your servers are burning, they are like, your product is so successful that people are running after you. You don't need money to get to that. You just need like a coder or 2 and no more.